Hello, everyone. Am I am I echoing?
Yes. And
Is
Siobhan is fixing her
that
tech
better?
support. Yes, it is. Would you
Okay.
uh while she's coming back, we are airing live on Facebook. If anyone doesn't want their pictures shown on Facebook, if anyone is not okay with that, let us know and we can go in. Just send us an inbox and we can change your thing real fast. And then we'll also be taking pictures if that's okay. To commemorate this event. We couldn't do this without our sponsors as well. I forgot to mention them, and we have a bunch of them. So we appreciate every last one of them.
All right, and it's back to me. All right. So good afternoon. We are so happy to have everyone here today. Um, of course, this month is Domestic Violence Month, and we are so happy that you all could um, take out some time today to join us. And the reason why she said you are going to love me is because even though this is a very serious subject, and it is one that is near and dear to um, my heart, and we want to definitely kick off and give you guys a lot of information. And please feel free to chat information, put things in Facebook for our speakers to be able to give answers. And Sorors, please, you guys help me with watching out for any questions or things that we may be able to answer during the presentations. Um, I also do not want it to be boring at all. So we are going to do things maybe a little bit different than you may be used to. I might be telling my age, but I do not like anything monotone. Think of like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, that monotone voice like Bueller, Bueller. So we are not going to be asleep. We are going to make sure that we're going to be active. We're going to be giving you great information, and we're going to make sure that we try to keep everybody active, motivated, listening, so that you will be able to stay engaged in this process as we kick off the series this month, because we want you to come back. So we have a dynamite speaker ready for you today. I am the moderator, so I'm going to off my therapist hat. I am no longer a therapist. I am now the moderator. I am your girl V. Listen to me, and we gonna kick it off. We're gonna do this thing right. So tonight it is a thin line between love and hate. So y'all know that's my song, right, from H Town. Y'all remember the crazy chick that was like whooping Martin in that when he was playing her, in that movie. So I was gonna play it, but I was echoing, so I might have to la la la. Okay, y'all ready? Mel, my rendition. Okay, it's my mic. It's a thin line between love and hate. It's a thin line between love and hate. Mel, you got the background? Come on with it.
No, we're gonna
What?
let Keisha have the background
Oh, okay. You
as
were
she's
supposed
speaking.
to.
Let me mention this while I got you on pause.
Got
There'll be
me.
some breakout rooms just in case the subject matter does get heavy. So we have breakout rooms 1 through 5. And if anyone needs to go to the breakout room during the conversation, just inbox one of the members of ACES and we'll get you moved over there. So we have an hour. Thank you,
Well, the
moderator.
coming. All right. Let's. ahead and let's go ahead and meet LaKetia Jones. Come on, Keisha, because I see I can't get no help. She sing all the time any other day. Keisha.
Can y'all hear me out there?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is LaKetia Jones. I am a member of Alpha Chi Epsilon Sigma Social Work Sorority Incorporated. I am the Eastern Region Director, and I'm also the CEO and owner of Purpose Healing LLC. And as Siobhan has so eloquently sung for us and told us, today's topic is thin line between love and hate, and I am your presenter. Can everybody see these slides? So, okay, even though we can see these slides, listen, domestic violence is a topic that a lot of people try to stay away from. They don't want to talk about it, but the reality is that every 20 minutes, there is, well, actually every minute, 20 people are being abused by a romantic partner in the United States, which means about 10 million women and men experience physical abuse in a given year. So we've heard the phrase thin line between love and hate at some point. And, you know, Siobhan referenced the movie Thin Line Between Love and Hate, but this is also something that people don't realize, that there are love-hate relationships with people that you claim to love, people you are intimate with. And sometimes those love-hate relationships cause us to behave in certain ways. So we're going to talk about that today, okay? And I don't want to be the only one talking. So we got some questions and answers that's going to be coming in. Send some messages in the chat. Those of you that are tuning in live, if you've got questions, if you want to chime in with your answers, chime in with your answers as we're talking about this subject. So today we're talking more about the adults when it comes to thin line between love and hate, okay? So what is domestic violence or intimate partner violence? A lot of people have their own view on what it is. But the actual definition for domestic violence is that it is an epidemic that affects individuals in every domestic violence is the willful intimidation, physical assault, battery, sexual assault, and or any other abusive behavior that is a part of a systematic pattern of power and control perpetrated by one intimate partner against another. It also includes physical violence, sexual violence, psychological violence, and emotional abuse. So domestic violence is something that has been around for a very long time, and it affects people regardless of their age, their economic status, their sexual orientation, gender, race, religion, or nationality. And guess what, y'all? Anybody can be an abuser. Abusers come from all kinds of groups, cultures, religions, and economic levels. You could be a neighbor to someone who is an abuser. Your pastor could be an abuser, your friend, your child's teacher, a relative, a coworker. You yourself could even possibly be an abuser. And you may find out a little bit more about whether or not maybe you are or someone you know is. So it's important to note that the majority of abusers are not violent with other people. They're typically only violent with their current or past partners. And most abusers, about 90% of them, actually do not have a criminal record. It's a misconception that most abusers are people who are felons and things of that nature, but it's not always the case. They're typically law-abiding citizens outside of their home or that relationship. Okay, so let's go into it a little bit more. So let's talk about some types of abuse. The main three types of abuse that we'll see when it comes to adult domestic violence and intimate partner abuse is physical abuse, emotional, and sexual. So physical abuse can be a physical threat. That's not where a person is actually putting their hands on someone or something like that, but they're threatening to do so. So it could be walking around with a weapon. Everyone remember the DC sniper? Well, the DC sniper, his former wife said that he never laid a hand on her. He actually would shoot his weapon and make her come outside and watch him shoot his weapon, and how he would knock off the head of a bottle and tell her, look at that, my aim is on point. He never said to her specifically, I'll kill you, but he implied it with the things that he said and the things that he had done. And that is what is considered to be a physical threat. If someone is putting their hands on you and they are breaking your bones, they're slapping you, kicking you, pushing you, pinching you, bruising you. Those are also physical forms of domestic violence. But I skipped one because I want to go back to it. I skipped two of them intentionally. Spitting on a person is a form of physical abuse. I don't know about you, but if you spit on me, that is the most disrespectful thing that you can do, to put your bodily fluids on me. And so spitting on someone is actually considered a form of physical abuse. And then strangulation, most people refer to that as choking, right? When somebody puts their hand around your throat, you like, oh, well, they choked me. It's actually strangulation. And strangulation, there's been an increase in physical abuse incidents that occur with strangulation. And strangulation has a lot of lasting effects. It can cause a person to have memory issues. They can experience issues of traumatic brain injury. They can also have petechia and hemorrhaging in their eyes. A lot of different things come with that. And it can also cause brain damage because of the air being left cut off from to their brain. So it's definitely important to know and understand that. And then we have emotional abuse, gaslighting, right? A person making you feel like you're crazy for feeling the way that you're feeling, or if you see something or you mention something and they're making you feel like, no, that's not what happened, you're misinterpreting it, but you know for a fact that I did see that, or I did experience that. That's important to know. Another form of emotional abuse is financial, right? If the person has all of the financial control, whether you're working or not, that person is in financial control and can use that to manipulate and abuse a person. You have verbal abuse. We've all heard the phrase, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, right? That's a lie, especially when those words are coming from the person that you love. When they're telling you stupid, you fat, you're ugly, you're worthless, you're never going to amount to be anything. Those things are hurtful, especially coming from that person that you're expecting to uplift you and to encourage you. So it's definitely important to know that if someone is talking to you verbally abusive, that is abusive behavior, and do not let them excuse that behavior. Intimidation, isolation, isolating you from your family. Oh, you don't need to hang out with your friends. Don't hang out with them because they're hoes, or don't hang out with them because I don't like them, they're players. Right? Things like that. Or I don't like when you go over to your mother's house because they're mean to me, they're disrespectful. They'll isolate you from your family and friends to keep you alone and make you feel like they're the only person that loves you and cares about you and wants the best for you. Humiliation. You cook a nice dinner, everybody's telling you how great the dinner is, and then they come out and they talk about, no, that was dry. That steak was dry. It wasn't good. Or they do something to humiliate you, talk about, look at her, looking like she's pregnant in that dress, right? Or it could be a woman saying something to humiliate a man. Yeah, okay, so he looked good, but he ain't worth nothing, ain't got no job, this, that, and the third, right? So it's important to know that. Stalking is a form of emotional abuse. This doesn't have to be, a lot of times we think domestic violence is just, or intimate partner violence is somebody that you're married to or you live with, but you can be married to a person or live with a person and they still can stalk you, right? So we go into technological abuse. All of us have cell phones. We're all on Zoom, Facebook Live, all the different technological platforms. People can stalk you by watching your social media page, seeing what you're posting, seeing where you're at. They can put trackers on your phones. They can put trackers on your vehicle. Those are forms of stalking, which is actually abusive behavior. So it is important to know that. Child abuse, they could be harming your children and you can feel helpless to be able to protect your children. Pet abuse, they could be harming your pet, right? Now let's talk about sexual abuse. Okay, so for the married people, a lot of times you have these different religious statements that, well, you know, you're supposed to give in to your spouse and your body belongs to your spouse and this, that, and the third. So the expectation, or at least back in the day, the expectation was when your spouse wanted it, you had to give it up, right? Wrong answer. You have a right to say no. You have a right to not be in the mood. But you also have instances of sexual coercion. And sexual coercion is when your partner is trying to force you or coerce you to participate in pornographic things like watching pornography or other acts that are of sexual nature that you're not comfortable with, like threesomes. They may tell you, well, if you don't, if you don't let me do this threesome with this other person, then I'm going to leave you. Or they may tell you, well, if you don't have sex with me or you don't do this sex act, then I'm going to go ahead and do it with somebody else. Because if you don't do it, somebody else will. So that's coercive behavior. Or they can even coerce you into prostituting or sleeping with someone else. Sometimes even with that sexual abuse, they can be forceful in their sexual acts that can cause you to feel like you have no choice but to be compliant with them, with what they're asking. So let's talk about some red flags and warning signs. How many of us have seen red flags and warning signs of sexual abuse but have ignored them? I know I have, right? There's been some warning signs of individuals who are extremely jealous. And at first it might seem cute. Oh, they care about me. They just want to make sure that I'm okay and I'm good. Well, where were you at? Who was you with? Who was that guy that was speaking to you? Stuff like that. It may seem cute initially, but after a while it becomes accusatory. There may be some possessiveness, unpredictability in their behavior. One minute they're okay, the next minute they're mad about I don't know what, right? Extremely controlling behavior, antiquated beliefs about the role of a woman or a man in a relationship, sabotage and birth control methods, blaming the victim for things that are wrong. These are things, controlling the finances, threatening or abusing other family members, harassment of the victim at work, constantly calling you. You're getting 20, 30 phone calls within a couple of hours from that person, or text messages. These are things that's important to pay attention to. It may start out as really cute, but they're not always going to be cute. So make sure you're paying attention to those things and put it into perspective and know that, hey, this might be some abusive behavior. Let me pay attention to it. Because a lot of times we see that writing on the wall and we think, oh, I can love them through that. No, you can't. You can't change them. They can change themselves, but you can't change them. So this is the biggest question everybody asks. Why do victims stay? Why don't they just leave? They just need to leave. I don't know why they keep putting up with this. So before we go into the reasons on why victims stay, let's talk about the cycle of abuse. There's 4 different components to the cycle of abuse. The first one is the tension building. That's when you're walking on eggshells. You're trying to make sure you don't do anything to upset your partner. And then you have the second component is where the incident happens. It's where either the verbal abuse occurs, the emotional abuse occurs, the physical abuse, or it may not even be the abuse. It may just be that they're arguing with you, or they're blaming you for stuff, they're threatening you, or they're intimidating you. But then you get to the reconciliation. I'm sorry. I just get so mad, I'll never do it again. You know, if you would just stop doing stuff, you know, I don't like pork chops. You know, I only like chicken. If you would just not make the pork chops, then I wouldn't get upset like this, right? And then you go through a calm period where everything is good. That's the honeymoon phase. That's when everybody is doing good. The victim, and so that's what happens. We go through the cycle. Sometimes we can go from 1 to 3. Sometimes we can stay in the tension building stage for years or weeks or months. So it's not so cut and dry. But then why do victims stay? We've got listed here some reasons victims stay. I want some people in the chat to give some other reasons other than what you can see on the slide on why victims stay. We've got shame here. Some people don't want to tell people that they're being abused. Maybe they're somebody who's a police officer. They may be military. It may be a man that's being abused. They have children. They need to provide for their children, or they want their children to have the nuclear family. So they're not telling they don't want to leave. Unsupported friends or family, right? Maybe that person has tried to leave before. They've come to you before and you got mad because they wouldn't leave. So they don't want to leave anymore. They don't want to try to leave because they have nowhere to go. Fear that nobody's going to believe them. Think about it. If you have a male that's being abused, and we'll just say that this man is 6'4", 250 pounds, and now he is being abused by a female that is 5 foot nothing. She keeps slapping him, knocking him upside his head, cussing him out, calling him everything but what the name that his mama gave him. Do you think that he's going to tell somebody that he's being abused? Do you think people are going to believe that? Because physically he should be able to handle her, right? So I see we have some things, families encourage them to stay. Minimal or no work experience. Maybe they've been a household engineer for the last 10 or 15 years and they've been home taking care of their children, right? So where am I going to go work if I've been a household engineer? Housewife or stay-at-home dad. For those that don't know, household engineer, I like to give them a job title because it's work, right? Maybe that's the way that they were raised. They grew up seeing that. So that's what love looks like. Their parents are still married 40 years later. Dad knocked mom around or mom knocked dad around. So guess what? That's what love looks like. I just got to do better. That's the thought process that they may have. Poor self-worth. They don't feel good about themselves. They don't think they can do anything better. That's this person, the only person that's going to love me. So I'm going to stay right here. They're scared. Security. Relying on the other person to be able to pay the bills. The culture of the victim's environment. You all are amazing. Some great responses in the chat. I love it. Belief that they could save or change the person. Let me tell you, the last time you could change another man or another woman was when they were in diapers. If they're going to change, they have to do it themselves. You can't change them. But a lot of times when we get in relationships, we think we can love the hell out of somebody. But the reality is we can't. We can't, because guess what? That person that's abusive, they're broken. They've got some stuff going on with them, and now they're taking it out on the one person that they're claiming to love. So it's important to pay attention to that. So, and then another in the chat, it says, for example, if a spouse that is a law enforcement officer. So if your abuser is a law enforcement officer, you're going to feel uncomfortable turning to law enforcement. Why would law enforcement help me? They're an officer. They're wearing the same uniform. They're not going to help me. They're in denial. They feel like they deserve it. Forget their self-worth. Yes, thank you. I love this. And then again, the financial dependence, right? But the faith belief system. As mentioned, I'm a minister, but guess what? Yes, God hates divorce. A lot of times we hear that, but God also does not want us to be in situations where we are being harmed physically, emotionally, or sexually. So that is not a good reason to stay into a relationship, and we should never allow someone to push that on us to tell us we have to stay in a relationship like that because of that, because that's not okay. And the thing of it is that there's some interesting information I found that a lot of time reasons that victims have for staying with their abuser, they're always going to be complex. It's never cut and dry. Domestic violence is not easy. Getting someone to leave is not easy. Everyone's story is different. I don't care how similar it is. But oftentimes when an individual is trying to leave an abusive situation, it is the most dangerous time. And statistically, there was a recent study that was done that showed that most intimate partner homicides found that 20% of domestic violence victims for homicide were not the actual victims of domestic violence. It was actually one of their family members, one of their friends, one of their neighbors, someone who intervened, even law enforcement responders. When law enforcement responds to domestic violence calls, these are the most dangerous calls to respond to. It is one of the top calls that they respond to that is a major danger because there's so much unpredictability with that call. Because you can have an officer that is responding to that call, and that man or that woman that is being abused may be asking for them to take them away, and the next thing you know, that person is jumping on their back, that officer's back for putting them in handcuffs, and you're like, what in the world? But they just beat you up. They just caused you harm. Why would you do that? The why is because of self-preservation. That person is still going to eventually have to encounter that abuser again. They're going to get out, maybe in 72 hours, maybe in a couple of months, depending on the circumstances, but they're going to get out, and chances are they're coming back, or that victim is afraid that they're going to find them. Because the reality is most times with intimate partners, we know our partner's family, we know where the family lives, we know things about each other, so it's not hard to find that individual. It's not like they're going into the witness protection program. So we know how to find their family members. We know how to get at them. We as in the abuser. I'm not the abuser. And then men in abuse. Let's talk about men in abuse. Society says that domestic violence is man versus women. That is what the majority of society says. But did you know that that is actually a myth? 40% or more of domestic violence victims are actually men. 40% or more. Men aren't reporting in the same way that women are, but they also can be victims of domestic violence. Like I said earlier, if you have that man that's 6'4" and that woman that is 5 foot nothing, 120 pounds soaking wet, and she's slapping him around, just because he's not hitting her back doesn't mean that he can handle being hit, or that it's okay for him to be hit because she's smaller in stature. She doesn't have a right to put her hands on him, no different than he doesn't have a right to put his hands on her. But the moment that he responds to her physically, it's going to be a problem. And I like that. Siobhan said when she was a deputy, she locked up more couples. Sometimes both are going to go to jail because it's not just a one-sided incident. It may be both of them. So it's a mutual abuse, right? And then some don't want to see their children's father locked up. So they're going to fight tooth and nail. They're changing for different things. But women will say the same things men say. I'll never do it again. I'm sorry. If you stop making me mad. Women yell and scream. That can be emotionally abusive, especially when you're calling a man dumb, they're lazy, they're worthless, they're a bum, right? And do we know that since COVID has happened, there have been so many increases in domestic violence because people have had to be in a home with each other. Tensions are high. Even in cases where domestic violence was not a potential issue, we were looking at that, the possibility of domestic violence. So it is definitely important. And child abuse as well increased. Because guess what? When children are there, when domestic violence occurs, that is a form of child abuse. When the children are present, we assume that because the children are asleep, that they don't know what happened. But sometimes they hear the aftermath, but we also have to understand that every closed eye isn't sleep. So sometimes the children are awake and they are hearing what's going on. They are seeing what is going on. That is also a form of child abuse. It causes a lot of psychological damage to children. We have probably all encountered children who have had some adverse childhood experiences because of being witnesses, child witnesses to domestic violence. So it is definitely important to know and understand that with this, and because that cycle continues, it's continual. We see them over and over and over again, right? So it's definitely important to know that. And then of course, how domestic violence is dealt with in the civilian sector is totally different than in the military, right? So I work for the Department of Defense. So as working for Department of Defense, the rules are a little bit different on how things are done. I'm not going to go into that because this is not a sponsored event by them, but it is definitely important to know and understand the cycle of abuse. So I wanted everyone to know that anytime you witness, because a lot of times we can be bystanders and we don't say anything. We may see something happen and we go, "Ooh, that ain't none of my business. I'm gonna go on about my business." But that's a no-go. We need to report it. So some of the ways that we can report it when we're seeing it is calling the confidential hotline for an anonymous report. And you can call that hotline for yourself. Every state has its own hotline, but this is the National Domestic Violence Hotline. And that number you can call, you can get a safety plan done. You can work with someone who is a credentialed victim advocate. I happen to be a credentialed victim advocate for domestic violence. You can work with someone that can help you develop a safety plan. Even if you're choosing to stay in that home, to stay in that relationship, it is still good to have a safety plan for when stuff hits the fan. Because again, it's a thin line between love and hate. They may love you today and hate you tomorrow. So if they're in that moment where they're hating you, you need to know how you can safely remove yourself from that situation for your protection, for the protection of your children and your pets if you can as well. You need to have options available to you and know what they are, because in the moment of trying to get away from a situation, your adrenaline is high, your fear is high, you're overwhelmed, you're frustrated, so much going on. Even when you have the police there, it's still a lot going on. So having that safety plan in advance is good. Always talking to someone in advance just to know what your options are, to know what your rights are. Because remember, every minute, 20 people are physically abused by a romantic partner in the United States. So this means that more than 10 million women and men experience physical abuse in a given year. So now I want to go into the question and answer portion. I want to hear from you all. I want to know, what are your questions? What can we address to help you, whether it's for yourself, whether it's for someone else. Even if it is for yourself and you're posing your question, you can pose your question as a hypothetical. My brother's baby mama, sister, cousin is going through this. How can I help them? You don't have to self-identify if you're not choosing to. So do we have some questions in the chat?
Not at the moment.
Not at the moment. Anyone want to offer any questions? What about on our social media?
LaKetia, how would one go about addressing, some people are scared to start therapy. What would therapy look like working with a domestic violence, I'm gonna say survivor?
Well, first of all, it is definitely important as a therapist to understand domestic violence and to understand trauma. So are you asking for the therapist from their perspective or from the victim's perspective?
Do both. Was it like walking in, because some people have never experienced therapy. Was it like walking in, and was it like as the therapist?
So for the victim walking in, they're going to range. You may have some victims that may come in and they're going to tell you everything that happened. They're going to give you a play-by-play. They may feel comfortable with you. They may feel like, I finally have somebody who's going to help me. But then you're going to have those individuals that aren't going to trust you. So it is going to take some time to get them to open up, and just be, as the therapist, be patient with them. Start small. Asking simple questions like, well, how was your day? Walk me through your day. What did you do today? What's a typical day like? And as they continue to go through typical days, they'll start opening up and talking about different things, but you've got to build a rapport with that individual. Most people are not going to walk in and say, okay, listen here, look here, Melrita. I'm trying to leave my significant other. They've been beating me up every day and I don't know what to do. They're ashamed. We go back to those reasons why victims stay. Shame is one of the major reasons, because people think that everybody's looking at them judgmentally for staying. And partly because a lot of people be like, oh, I wouldn't take that. I wouldn't stay there. But you'd be surprised on how some of the strongest men and strongest women have been victims of domestic violence. And it isn't because of being weak. It is simply because of the fact that they love someone and they thought that they could love that person through their anger. They thought that they could love that person through their insecurity and their brokenness. But that didn't mean that that individual who was the victim, that didn't mean that they're weak. They're not weak at all.
We have a question in the chat.
Okay, what is that question?
Do abusers tend to show any potential warning signs?
Oh, yes. So some of the potential warning signs I mentioned earlier was the extreme jealousy, right? That can be cute. Looking at your phone, or, oh, let me see your phone, or monitoring your social media page. They'll identify that they're doing some of these things, this possessiveness. Even how they're telling you, oh, you're going to wear your hair like that? Why do you have to wear those shoes? I don't like those shoes. Sometimes it seems cute. It seems like they're just wanting you to look your best, or they're just concerned about you, but it actually is a marker for potential abusive behavior, controlling behavior. And this is the thing. Nobody shows up to their first few dates and says, okay, hello, I'm LaKetia, and I just want to let you know that if you do something to upset me, I'm going to bust your head open. I'm going to talk to you crazy. I'm going to tell you that you have to have sex with me whenever I want it. They're not going to tell you that they're an abuser from the very beginning. Domestic violence is a slow roll. That person who is the abuser, they slowly do the work to get that person under their control. It's not an overnight thing. For some people, it can take years. Some people can take weeks or months. It just depends on the individual who is the victim. So very good question. I saw also in the chat that sometimes it's challenging to leave if an individual is an undocumented victim. That is, if a person has certain controls, because you may have your documentation, but maybe they're holding on to it. Maybe you have all of the things that you need to be able to remain in the United States, but that person has it. They've got your passport, they have your social security card, they have your driver's license. You can't go to a doctor's appointment unless they're present. They won't let you do anything. They're counting your birth control to make sure you're taking it. Or they're hiding it so you can't take it because they want you to have another baby. So it's extremely important. Or they could be poking holes in the condoms, because again, it ain't just the men. The women do stuff too. We can be very cantankerous. Let's see, I have a question that says, how does a parent support a child who discloses they are in a domestic violence relationship? So if you are a parent and you have a child that is in a domestic violence relationship, the first thing you need to do is make sure that your child knows that you are there to support them. But you also have to support their decision to stay in that relationship, because we're talking adults right now, right? You'll hear next week about the teens and all of that. But when we're talking about adults, we have to support, they have a right to choose. And if they're choosing to stay in that relationship, we have to support that. We don't like it as parents. I'm a parent. I won't want my daughter to remain in an abusive relationship, or my son. However, they have a right to choose what it is that they want for their life. So we have to be supportive of them and let them know that they always have some place to come back to, and that we are a part of their safety plan, instead of giving them an ultimatum. If you don't leave, don't call me no more. Because then that furthers the offender's ability, or the abuser's ability, to be able to isolate them and control them.
Another question in the chat. What are some of the manipulative tactics abusers use against the survivor and surrounding individuals to try to keep victims from leaving?
Children. Well, you know, you ain't working. You ain't gonna be able to take care of the kids. You're gonna have to go back to the projects I found you at. Or had to go back and live with your mama, right? Those are some of the tactics. Using the children, using finances, telling them that nobody else is gonna love them, especially when they already have low self-esteem or a sense of low self-worth, playing on those things. Because that person at one point loved you or claimed to love you. And they're definitely going to play on everything that they can to control you and manipulate you. Or you can leave, but you can't take my children. You can leave, but you can't take the dog. You can't take the cat, things like that, right? It's important. I said, are narcissist abusers? I can definitely speak on that. All narcissists are not abusers. However, narcissists definitely can be abusive. It just depends on the individual, because some narcissistic tendencies tend to be abusive and manipulative behavior, especially in the emotional realm, with the humiliation or the intimidation, the gaslighting. Those are definitely major markers in the emotional realm where narcissists are going to thrive as an abuser.
Can you hear me?
I do want to say this, all abusers are not intentionally abusive. Sometimes people are abusive and don't realize that their behavior is abusive. And again, that's because that's from lack of knowledge from their part. It doesn't excuse the fact that their behavior is abusive, but sometimes they don't know, because it goes back to what was stated earlier, that may have been what they grew up in. They may have grown up in that environment, and that's what love looked like for them, and that's their only example of love, because we typically will mimic what we've seen. So if we grew up in abusive situations, at whether the abuser or the victim witnessing the abuse, we sometimes can become the abuser or the victim.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, we have a question in the chat, but I was gonna also say, you get on about the manipulating thing. Have you got any other examples? One example I used was that sometimes abusers can manipulate by saying that they may hurt themselves or harm themselves if you leave them.
Yep, they would, and that is a form of manipulation. Suicidal gesture, suicidal ideation, saying, well, if you leave, I don't have any reason to live, I'm gonna kill myself. You know, things of that nature, or you know, but and not just that, some of the manipulation too will be sexually. Because if that person knows that they can put it down for you, what we gonna do? I'm gonna go ahead and make up with you and put it down sexually so I can convince you to stay.
Right.
That is a form of manipulation as well.
We have another question in the chat. It says, can abusers change?
Abusers can change with training and understanding, because again, every abuser doesn't know that what they're doing is wrong. Sometimes they're mimicking behavior that they've seen. So they can change, but they have to be willing to change. Some people don't desire to change. This is the way I am, this is the way I'm gonna be. Is my way or the highway. So it's definitely important to know that they can change, but they do need to go to treatment so that they can change. They do need to figure out what is the root of why they're behaving the way that they're behaving. And therapy is good for them. You also have domestic violence groups for abusers. Just like you have groups for victims that help empower the victims, we have groups to educate the offenders to help them to keep from reoffending. I see another question in here. It says, what do you do if you have already put papers on the individual and they continue to violate the order? As a credentialed advocate, that is one of the things that I have seen that is very, very difficult, because a person will continually violate the order and they don't care. And so you have to put the things in place, working with your victim witness liaison, or well, that's what it's called in my state in Virginia. Working with your credentialed advocates, working with your domestic violence shelters, looking at what your options are. Maybe you have to relocate. You may have to use address confidentiality so that they don't have your address on court documents and things of that nature, because you can keep your address, your physical address confidential, and use another address for all of your court documents to go to and things of that nature to prevent them from being able to violate it. But we also have to follow through. When they violate, call the police every time they violate. Don't give them any passes, because individuals who are continually violating, they are habitual line steppers. They're going to continue.
We have another question.
Okay, they're going to continue to step over those lines if we do not hold them accountable. What's the next question?
It says, what if the police do not believe you and take the abuser's side?
So technology can be our best friend. Sometimes we have to record and not let the other person know that you're recording, so that you can get the proof that you need that that person is being abusive. Because sometimes, and especially, and I see this a lot when men are the ones that are the victims, because as a woman, I can turn on the waterworks as soon as the police get there and act like I'm also hurt and he did this and he did that. So it is important to understand that sometimes that is going to happen. So it is important that we are making sure we're keeping documentation, but also following through. You know, when we're calling the police, not say, you know, dropping the charges. Sometimes we that's beyond our control, but not dropping the charges, following through with the protective orders and the charges that are being put forth, so that the police will believe. And it shouldn't be about belief or not belief. It should go before the judge.
There's another question. Do you feel like you've seen more DV when there's a substance use background, or more so from the abuser's previous environment?
It's a combination. It's kind of like 50-50. Some of it is previous environment, some of it is substance abuse, some of it is a combination of the two. And that's the thing, is like a lot of times we look to see what is the, you know, we try to put everything into a box. But the thing about domestic violence is no matter how similar one case is to another, they're still different, because it's different people. So the factors are going to be different. A lot of the statistics are just there to give us kind of a general understanding of how things happen. So substance abuse is definitely something that is going to increase the risk of domestic violence, but an abuser's previous environment may as well, may be an increase for it as well. And I do want to point out too, is because I talked about men being abused as well, but domestic violence is just as prevalent in same-sex relationships as it is in heterosexual relationships. So it's not just women being abused or men being abused. It happens both ways, whether it's same sex or same gender loving, or if it is a heterosexual relationship, it happens.
What if it is a friend on the force?
So if there's a friend that is on the force, then that is where your domestic violence shelters are going to be beneficial to you, reaching out to them and your victim liaison and identifying that they have a friend that is on the force. So you're leery because of the fact that you don't know if that friend is actually going to do the right thing, or if they're going to take their friend's side. So utilizing all of the options that are available to you. And I do believe it was put in the chat that there is some local providers for the your local area domestic abuse support. So definitely tapping into those support systems.
Can you distinguish between formal and informal supports? Kind of discuss each of those, what they look like in a situation, a domestic violence situation. Formal and informal supports.
So informal support could be a talking to a victim advocate, talking to clergy. Informal support can also be talking to just getting information, like education and information, developing a safety plan, knowing what your rights are, what's available to you. That's the informal support, where you don't actually have an active domestic violence case that's in the court system or a protective order that's in place for you and the abuser. But when you're doing formal support, you now have police involvement, you have the court involvement. You are at that time, you should have victim advocacy support as well. Oftentimes you're going to be referred to the domestic abuse shelters. You may even have some states have victim witness liaisons within the courts. So you'll have that option as well.
What can parents do to help children recover from being exposed to the abuse?
Place them in therapy. A lot of parents don't want to put their kids in therapy because they feel like all their secrets are going to be uncovered. The one thing about children, especially when they're younger and they've witnessed abuse, is children have the neuroplasticity of the brain. So their brain can go back to a pre-traumatic phase if they're getting the proper nurturing that they need. And some of that is going to come by them being able to process through what they've experienced and that environment changing. If they're remaining in that environment that they've been exposed to, if that's still their environment, they're still going to have a hard time, because children who witness abuse can definitely experience symptoms that are very similar to, if not being, post-traumatic stress disorder.
What if your husband is on the police force and he is the abuser?
Again, that is when you're tapping into the domestic violence shelters, tapping into your local clergy, the credentialed advocates, and sometimes you will have to go and see if you can get support from neighboring counties or states. And that's always hard when you have with the police force. We see the Lifetime movies all the time where women are staying in situations and unfortunately end up being killed, or they kill their spouse. And I'm saying women, but it's not just limited to women, where they end up as the battered person. They kill their abuser because for fear and self-preservation.
Does socioeconomic status matter in domestic
violence? No,
violence?
it does not. It does not. Domestic violence happens whether you have money or you do not have money, or you're in between. It does not matter. You have money does not stop a person from being abusive, and it may make it worse. Having these may make it worse.
What can parents to help children recover from being exposed to abuse?
She answered that one. Some states allow recordings without consent.
I thought she didn't.
She did. Some states allow recordings without consent into evidence with law enforcement and court cases. Is this the case in all states, especially in the area of DV/IPV?
It is not the case in all states. Every state is different on whether or not they allow recordings. in cases of domestic violence and intimate partner violence. But as far as allowing recordings, that would be for that recording to be heard in the court of law. It doesn't mean that that recording is still not good to be for law enforcement to see that this did happen, to at least get that victim some time to be able to get a safety plan in place and tap into support services by removing that abuser.
Did you answer what risk factors intensify the probability of abuse?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
You said what risk factors intensify the probability of abuse? Risk factors are definitely leaving, when a person is trying to leave, because when that person is trying to leave an abusive situation, the abuser loses their power and control, because domestic violence is about power and control. So when they're losing that power and control, they will respond in a lot of different ways. And unfortunately, we see a lot of murders. There are a lot of men and women that have been killed as a result of domestic violence when they were trying to leave. And again, I pointed out earlier that family members sometimes are the ones that end up killed because they were trying to help intervene, law enforcement, friends. But then other risk factors are, of course, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, mental health disorders are definitely risk factors as well. And finances can be a risk factor too. You know, if there's financial stress, unmanaged anger, these are all risk factors.
How has COVID exacerbated domestic violence?
Oh my, because now you got to sit in the house. You can't be ripping and running, taking the kids here, there, and everywhere. Maybe the abuser can't be at their other side piece's house to get their relief. So everybody's stuck in the house together, having to deal with each other. They're walking on eggshells. The tensions are high. And so now we see cases with COVID, especially when we were all locked down, we saw more cases that of families that weren't ordinarily in DV situations. We had more instances because people are drinking more. They're sitting in the house. They're having to deal with each other. They didn't really like each other, but it didn't matter because they were passing like two ships in the night. But now they're sitting up under each other all the time. And so you chewing too loud and it's irritating me. So I'm gonna smack you upside the head.
Hold on.
Very good questions.
What are, you got it, Vaughn?
I was gonna say, financial issues, might have lost a job. All of those things have happened with COVID.
What are some,
Children at home all day.
Because you've seen an increase, not just in domestic violence, but child abuse as well.
What are some,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. What are some signs and warnings that someone may, what are, I guess, some of the signs and warnings that someone may be looking, maybe suffering from? I can't read tonight, I'm sorry. What are some signs and warnings that someone may be suffering from DV? I guess looks, hiding patterns, words maybe, and avoidance.
Okay, so some of the physical signs definitely be seeing different scarring coming up. You might see that they're trying to cover up a black eye with makeup, and it may be that it's changing, because you'll see when it's domestic violence, when somebody's been hit, it goes from like purple and brown and black. It changes colors. But then excuses that are given that don't make sense. Oh, I was cooking and I opened the cabinet, ran into the cabinet, hit my eye in the cabinet. Well, wait a minute, you 5'2", I've been to your house, your head don't come nowhere near your cabinet, so it doesn't make sense. You know, so different things like that are indicators. Various injuries that are, that are present. It may be that this week you had your arm in a sling because you sprained your wrist. Next week you on crutches because you hurt your knee. And so it may be an indication that there's some things going on. You may have a hard time sitting down gingerly, because not every abuser is going to hit a person where it can be seen. Sometimes abusers who are physical in nature know how to hit a person where their clothing doesn't show it. So, if they laugh, it may hurt, their side may hurt because they're being hit in the side or something like that. Some of the words like, well, I can never do anything right. Or if they're saying things like, well, I have to hurry up and get home and fix dinner, like they're always rushing. They're avoiding, hanging out or contact. They used to be outgoing, used to talk, and now they're not. These are different, and these are different indicators. There are some classic looks, but of course the victim becomes very skilled in hiding the fact that they are in an abusive situation.
How do you help someone in denial that they're in a domestic violence relationship?
The way that I do it is I tell stories. I like to tell them a story about someone I know who's going through something, or someone I've seen that's going through something, and it'll be very similar to what they're going through, so that they can kind of hear the story. And I like to tell the outcome of where they tapped into the victim witness and they were able to get support for housing. They helped them get a job and things of that nature, to show them the positive of what can happen if they get the help that's available to them.
Which do you think
It says,
is more?
which is, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Which is more prevalent, emotional or physical? And I guess they're talking about abuse, and which has more of a lasting effect?
Well, let's see. Physical wounds heal for the most part. There may be some residual effects to different physical wounds, especially when it's reoccurring wounds in the same areas. But I would say emotional is more lasting, especially if that individual does not seek therapy and get the support that they need to process through what they've been through and know and understand that the behavior of someone else is not their fault. And it also alters, emotionally, it alters the way that that person thinks about themselves, how they approach future relationships, and all of that. Even with therapy, it's going to cause that individual to still second guess or question every person that they're dealing with in relationship, and not just romantic relationships, work relationships, friendships, every relationship. It will impact them.
We have one more question, and I know that our hour is coming close to an end. Let's see, it says, what is some advice to prevent or decrease or have a way out of domestic violence, particularly during the current climate, with this ongoing pandemic? Things have begun to open and people are returning to work and school. However, some people are still at home with their abuser. So I guess they're wanting to know what is some advice to prevent or decrease to have a way out of domestic violence, especially now during COVID-19, the pandemic.
Okay. So some of the ways to, and I'm going to talk about preventing, period, and then I'll kind of go into the current climate. Some of the ways to prevent or decrease domestic violence is to take your time to get to know someone. Oftentimes we get into relationships, we don't take our time. We believe we believe what they present to us initially. So the representation that the person gives you is what we're believing, but take your time to get to know them, see them in different environments, see them when they're under stress, see them when they're angry and how they respond, see how they have dealt with, ask questions about previous relationships. If you meet a person from a previous relationship, see how they interact, because those are markers that are going to let you know how this person is. Because again, as I stated earlier, no one is going to show up. I'm not going to show up on the first date and tell you, hi, I'm LaKetia, and I just want you to know if you upset me, I'm going to punch you in the face. I'm not going to say that if you do things that I don't like, I'm going to talk down to you and make you feel like you're nothing. I'm going to force you to have sex when you don't want to, and to do things sexually that you're not interested in. Nobody shows up with that. It is a slow roll. It develops over time. So you have to take your time. And when you see the writing on the wall, when you see those warning signs, believe them and stop thinking that you have the power to change them. We may be Superman and Superwoman in our own right in various other ways. But again, you cannot change a man or a woman. The last time they were able to be changed by someone else was when they were still in diapers. As an adult, The change that they need, only they can make. You can support a person through change, but you can't change them. So it is very important to understand that we allow people to, if they need some work, let them do the work. Stop thinking that you can love them through it. Because as powerful as love is, there's still limitations. Then in terms of preventing it or decreasing it from the current climate, with people still being at home with their abuser, that's a hard one, because of the fact that, you know, at the end of the day, sometimes you don't know what you could have done to set the abuser off. You have a person that may be walking on eggshells and doing everything right, and that person may be mad because their TV show didn't show up today because there was a CNN special that interrupted their regularly tuned show. So now they're upset and they're taking it out on the victim. So, but it is tapping into the resources. I would definitely say tap into the resources, know what those resources are. You have a lot of different domestic violence pages to where you can go to those, that website and look at that website, and then you can easily click off of that website and it will remove it from your history. So you can be getting the information that you need, but not have it to where that person can check up on you. So just knowing the resources that are available to you. And sometimes offering, if the abuser is open to going to therapy for the relationship, you can put it on yourself. I need to go to therapy because I need to work on me so I can be better for you. Say that you're doing it to help them, so you're better for them. So you're getting the therapy so that you can get your support. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. She placed on there the website that you can go to that actually will come out of your the ncadv.org will come out. There's a lot of resources that are out here. There's support that is out here. Call a therapist, ask a therapist, go to the courthouse, ask somebody. There is help that is out here. You do not have to go it alone. And I do want to say this, if there's anyone that is on here that is clergy that's tuning in, please stop telling people that God hates divorce and sending them back into abusive situations. That is not healthy and it is not godly.
Thank you so much. I'm with you on that. Amen, sister. LaKetia, I'm so sorry that I was so involved in my singing. I didn't even introduce and tell them how how much of an expert you were, because you are a therapist. You are licensed. You're a licensed master social worker, proud U.S. Army veteran. You're the owner of Purpose Healing LLC. You're credentialed, and you did say this, a comprehensive victim intervention specialist. You specialize in domestic abuse, sexual abuse, child abuse. You're an active member, of course, with ACEs. You also are the Eastern Regional Director. You believe that healing is intentional. I like that, actually. I like that a lot. I think I'm gonna have to steal that. I'm gonna have to use it with my own clients. You so believe that you empower others, and you like to recognize and accept and walk in their own worth. I love that. So guys, we have resources and things in the chat. We also want to make sure that we thank all of our partners. We want to thank Ms. Jones. She did a marvelous job. You were not boring at all. You did your thing, honey. You were captivating. That's what I like. Ms. Jones, what you putting in the chat?
I did see a final question is asked, will the programs assist if there's no physical violence? Yes, it will. Yes, the programs will assist if there's no physical violence. If there's no physical violence, you're not going to be able to get a protective order. You're not going to be able to get someone arrested and incarcerated. But there's still services available if a person is going through emotional abuse. When it's physical and sexual, that is when the law will definitely be involved, unless it is stalking. Stalking actually is something that will rise to the level of the courts being involved.
Oh, let's remind everybody about next week's topic. What is next week's topic?
Love should not hurt, and that's the youth, teens, and young adults.
Yes, that's gonna be a good one. Yes, that's gonna be a very good one.
Keisha, if you'll drop your share so we can take a picture real fast. We hear people logging off. We can get a
Absolutely.
picture.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You were amazing as always. And like again, we said, thank everyone for coming. We did, for those who weren't on here, we did say we were going to take a picture if everyone is okay with that. If you're not okay with that, we understand. And if Keisha was almost, she said she's the pastor. It's benediction. Are we done? Are you good?
We're good.
Okay, so we consider ourselves dismissed, but if you want to stay for the picture, we would love for you to do it. So I'm gonna say
Please do.
1, 2, and 3. Thank you guys. Thank you. We hope to see you all back next Tuesday at 7 o'clock. Same time, same Zoom link. Siobhan, amazing. Thank you for everything.
Thank you. If you see something, say something, be helpful.
And send us an email, or if it's something else that you want further discussion with LaKetia, or want further resources, just let us know. Thank you.
Awesome job.
Yeah.
Good job, Keisha.
Yeah, awesome, Keisha.
Thank you, ladies.
Yes, great job.
Look, I knew you were gonna be dynamite.
We can start recording.